have the workspace and this space. So
Mm,
we got Yahya back.
there we go.
So
So this next round is going to be cross-examination.
yeah, I want to know really. Yeah, let's just jump right into it. And I'm gonna let you guys just try not to speak over each other. Let's remember. And I think we're doing a good job of that, as well as no cussing, just reminder. And then just so that we can make this broadcast easily heard for people, the big words kind of like
Bring him down.
make it
Yeah.
like punch you with something. It's like, oh, societal, but what society?
Got
Just
you.
try your best.
Got you. I got you.
All right, that sounds good to me. So I guess we do 5 minutes where one of us asks questions to the other. Who do you want to?
Well,
You
Mr.
want to just?
Yaya, how old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
Me?
Yeah.
I turned 23 tomorrow, actually.
Okay. So age before beauty. Mr. Lux, you can go first. What kind of question? You have a few seconds. Ask Yaya some question. One question.
Okay.
Let's start there.
Okay. So I guess basically, when you enunciated your fear, you're like people are gonna deflect, and there are people who kind of like were passive about slavery. So like they weren't owning slaves, but they were passive about it. Is your fear kind of like at the end of the day that you are afraid that we won't basically apprehend all the culprits within racism?
No, I'm. I think that really means. Think that really depends on what you mean by culprits. I think that like it's easy to point. Like I said, it's easy to point fingers at people like the neo Nazis or the slave owners, the ones who are doing the very obvious harm. But there's a lot of more subtle types of harm that are kind of pervasive and normalized. And my concern is that if we don't talk about how commonplace that is amongst people, we're not going to get a solution. If we just point our fingers at the people who are the most obvious.
Give me an example. Give me one example of a culprit, Mr. Lux. Give me one example of a culprit, and we can like break it
Hmm.
down from there.
Okay, so a culprit could be somebody who witnesses racism being done, but they're afraid to stand up because it's their boss, and so they're silent and to avoid risking losing their job. So like, I know that this is wrong, but I'm going to be silent because I got kids to feed, so I'm kind of complicit in racism, but I don't like it, but I'm not standing up for it. Is that one of the, I'm guessing, one of the culprits?
Okay, so the example would be Johnny, who happens to be Hispanic. He is working under Bill Gates, who happens to be white. And Bill Gates says, hey, Joe, you can't be my assistant because you're black. And Johnny goes, he knows that's wrong and he knows he should tell someone, but he doesn't, he wants to get that job. So he's fine with Black Joe not getting the job. So is Johnny the culprit?
Right, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah. So that's the, yeah, yeah. So that's the kind of
Okay, so
scenario.
then, if
Johnny,
that's how we're framing it, I would say my
yeah.
concern is are culprits and bystanders. Then, like
So
those,
Johnny is a bystander.
he's a bystander. I say he's complicit, even if he's not the perpetrator. He's complicit.
So what is he supposed to do to Mr. Gates? He
I
wants that
think
job that Black Joe has.
I feel like this is part of the issue of like a society set up this way. Like if it's acceptable for like Bill Gates to be like to treat a black employee like that, and people are just kind of like, oh, I don't want to say anything about it. But I hate Bill Gates because I know he's individually a racist. Like then we lose sight of the fact that like a society where we've normalized that response is also very dangerous. Like that's my concern.
Lux?
Oh, I mean, I guess it's I don't see it as a one-dimensional factor for why he would act like that. It could be that he's too dependent on money, and people in America stretch themselves too thin, and live and are like basically have $400 in savings. It could be that type of behavior. It could be the fact that people in America just generally aren't taught to stand up for things. They don't have a lot of fortitude. And so they're just kind of more of a passive people in general. Like even like for like the pay gap with women, like I think part of the pay gap with women is because women are taught to like not speak up for themselves. And so like there's multiple areas where people are kind of taught to like not stick up for things outside of race. And so I think that there's a general ethos in America of like being the passive, not speaking up person, as well as living outside of your means. And these are all factors that contribute to it outside of race.
I'm gonna push you both on this a little bit.
Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
Sure.
both of you think that on some level that one is taught to, okay, I just don't, I'm just bystand, and that's a bad thing. But and that's Yaya's kind of way. And then Lux, you're saying that Americans are kind of have gone to this way of not my problem. I'm just going to keep my head down and I just don't want to be involved because I'm stretched too thin. You think Americans don't stand up or not or learned from the past to not stand up for themselves?
Some of them. I actually, I would say the difference. I guess this is kind of like what I'm trying to reach at for a difference between me and Yaya is that I find that some of that complicit racism is acceptable. Like there's a level that where there's a level of sin that I find a tolerable level because I don't have any illusions that we'll be able to get rid of any like of all problems in our society. So it's like you have to so like if say let's say income inequality is wrong, right? And then the top level person makes $100,000 and the bottom level person makes $99,998, right? So is that is inequality, but there's got to be a threshold to where something is allowable. And to me, the person who um, is kind of complicit in some instances where racism is being done, where they don't stand up for it. I mean, I'm not overly concerned with those ones.
Yaya,
I think
are you
the
believe?
obvious for me area where I would disagree is that even with that analogy, I think you're underestimating the severity of like the damage that like complicity can do. Because like I keep going back to like it's easy to point fingers at the people who are most obvious, but there's a lot of harm that's been done by other people kind of just standing back and being like, oh well, it's not my business, right? That's how I mean I would argue that much of the violence that those individual, like kind of more dramatic perpetrators, or those people who do the most like harm in the most obvious way, the reason they can get away with so much is because so many other people are like, oh well, that's not really my problem, or I can't bring myself to be offended by that enough to do something.
So it's that bystander who we all think is complicit in racism. They do the most harm,
I would
essentially.
argue, yeah, I would argue a big chunk of the harm
Is done by just
is
people
done by
not
those.
saying
Yeah.
anything. And Lux, you're saying that those people are not saying anything because it's learned as an American learned behavior.
And I guess more of what I'm saying is that's who they are. So I don't think that this person is seeing racism, not standing up for it, and then seeing some other crime and then standing up for it. I think that there are
Mhm.
just people who are just silent, you know, you know.
But that's
I disagree
but
with
that's
that though.
okay. So we're both going at the individual, correct? So are y'all both saying that those individuals are responsible for the harm that they do, and that's not because of the system, income inequality or gender and all that
But I
stuff?
see, I think that's where we differ. I think I would say that like those individuals, like it's not just that like they're a person who's a bystander. I don't think it's that simple. I think that when it comes to specific issues, in this case, race, people learn that, oh, me being a bystander is acceptable. Like when it comes to an issue that has to do with race. Like I think that is part of the teaching that the system passes on to people, that like being a bystander on issues of race is kind of okay.
Yeah. Do you think that people get the same thing with sexual assault, or like, I feel the same way with that, but so like, but you don't?
Yeah, I do, but I'm my point. I think my point here is that like, it's not that in every situation they're just a person who stands by. I think that like part of being present in like a system that's sexist, that's racist, is that you learn to kind of just take some of that sexism, racism, and kind of like, it's okay. I don't
Okay,
think
so
it's like,
let's name a system. Name a system. Now we've named one. So let's name a system that y'all give me Yahya a system that is systematically racist. Like one system.
the criminal justice policing. Is that the kind of
Okay,
system you're
so
looking
a
for?
the police system, or let's say the police period, are racist and systematically racist. The police are
Mhm.
racist. Um, that's the system. Is that how we look at it, Mr. Lux? Are the police racist, and are how can we change that bias or change that system? And are we a part of that, and being complicit by allowing these people to continue on their systematic racism?
So I do believe that systemic racism exists. I think that many times it's, I,
But we're talking about policing, not systematic
oh, yeah,
racism.
yeah. Oh, and policing. So I believe there were instances of that. How much of it is a residual factor till today is up for debate, and then how much of it is actually based on race, because I do believe that sometimes race is conflated with class. And basically, Black people are thought of as low class. So whenever anything affects the low class, it's Black people. And I'm like, that's not really Black people. That are some Black people are like low class, but it's to deny that Black people are middle class or even upper class, I think is. So some of the what's called systemic racism in the justice system or policing is the increased encounters that Black people have with the cops because they are often in low income neighborhoods
Because of class.
because of class.
So really class would be the system that's racist, not policing.
I believe classism is a bigger problem than systemic racism.
But classism can cause systemic racism, could it not? And I asked both of y'all this question. I'm just poking.
Can classism cause? Yeah, I guess I could
Oh,
see
go
that.
ahead. Sorry.
No, I guess I could see that. I guess like the cause. I haven't worked out it causally, but I know that they have overlap. So I don't know.
Yeah, I would actually agree with that. I don't know. I like the cause. I think they're like intertwined. It's more like than like one causes the other. Like, or like maybe even they need each other. Like they need each other to exist. I feel like is the way that I would describe it.
Okay, so one thing I will bring you back to your introduction. Um, Yaya, you said about the hierarchy and that you people are at the bottom of that. And I want to kind of gauge, you never really responded to that, Mr. Lux. You feel that you are at the bottom of the hierarchy, and that's because of slavery.
I do.
I'm asking
Oh
because I
no,
mean, Yaya said earlier, like that was part of his introduction, is that you people, the blacks, are at the bottom of the hierarchy.
no. I definitely disagree with that. No, I don't for a second.
Why?
Because I think that us having a Black president is one of the things that shows that we're not at the bottom of the hierarchy.
He was half black, fairly black.
Okay, so yeah, okay. Well, the one regarded this is the thing, half Black. Was he even like if he was
Did he
like,
even say he was?
yeah, I don't know.
I'm just moderating. I'm just asking
We have
questions.
a maybe perhaps do we have a black vice president now? I don't know. So what that's why I don't like the whole race. So like
I mean, but you brought up President Obama. So, I mean, that's
Yes,
why
because, okay, so that's important because,
when it comes to colors,
yeah. So the reason
are
I brought up
colors at the bottom,
the,
and can they ever? What can they do to get to the top?
right. Okay, so because getting it's less about actual facts to me for when people argue this than it is a narrative. And the narrative before Barack Obama was president was, wouldn't it be great if one day we had a black president? And then now the narrative is predominantly, well, we'll wait till we get 44 black presidents. So that to me tells me that within the narrative of people who are looking for equality with racism with regards to Barack Obama, he counts as one, but not enough. And that's where what I'm more combative towards than whether the black person is achieving this success. It's more of the narrative and how it is this changes at, as things occur. So I don't know if that made sense, but I'm trying to.
Well, Yaya, how do you feel about? Give me your feelings about that. I mean, we started with colors being at the bottom, and
Mhm.
Lux is saying, well, Barack Obama was president,
Yeah,
so that we can't have colors at the bottom.
I
And but
think,
now we need 44 presidents.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so
no,
kind
that's
of,
not the
how about you
narrative.
kind of bring together a little bit what do you think Lux is saying? And this is something that I hear a lot. I mean,
Mhm.
he's kind of tight roping here.
Yeah, no, so this is exactly where I push back, and I think it ties in exactly to what I was saying earlier about like history repeating itself, because you can say, oh great, we had Obama as president, but what happened after that? What is the what's the nature of like the racial tension in our society post Obama? Did we not see like a resurgence in like open-faced white supremacy? I feel like that's been well documented to a certain extent. Like I think that like this idea that like, oh, we've pushed, so that's good. It's true, but it's a constant process to move forward. So you can be pushed back, and I think that if we're not steadfast and accurate with the way that we push forward, we can push back. We can take steps backward. I would argue that the last 4 years of the Trump presidency was a step backwards in terms of a lot of our relationship when it comes to talking about race in a healthy and meaningful way. And I think that it's like it's easy for us, and especially easy for people who want to kind of quell conversations about this, to be like, oh, well, look, this Black person was successful. There are this many Black people who are successful. And if we're moving towards equality, like we say we are, then should it not be like proportionate? Is that not the way that we want to talk about things? Like, when you talk about who holds wealth or who holds positions of power, like, okay, Black people make up a certain percentage of the population. Shouldn't we also be represented similarly when it comes to who's in politics, who has money, and things like that? I think that like pointing to one example like Obama, given the fact that people responded to Obama's presidency so negatively and that he's one example, that doesn't undo like the fact that we still have a problem. There's still a discrepancy.
So, in terms of equality, and I'm going to ask y'all both this, is the only way that we can get true equality, is it that we have to step back and we need to have Black supremacy? And that can be for next 400 years, get Black supremacy through force. Because I mean, if you look at what's going on, that's what's being said. The narrative is that through force, we need to have Black supremacy. So is that the way that we can get to some type of equal sense of being?
Do you want me to take that first, or do you?
Either one.
Yeah, I'm not advocating for Black supremacy. There have been groups that are Black supremacist groups. I'm not supporting the idea that Black people need to be on top and everyone else needs to be underneath.
But
I say,
and then
yeah,
okay, so but we don't want history to repeat itself, but at the same time, we need to learn history. And I think, Mr. Lex, you were saying absolute power corrupts absolutely. So wouldn't you say that in order for there to be real change and justice and all that good stuff is by having Black supremacy for a little bit?
Yeah, I would. That's the problem that I have with not maintaining that Black people can be racist, is because if the racist tendencies that exist in some Black people goes unchecked, once it's amplified by power, you will have Black supremacy. And I think that
But what do you mean by racist tendencies? What do you mean by that? Like, could you describe that for me? What do you mean by racist tendencies?
Basically, so like the fruit of racism is the action that you do, right? And then it comes from somewhere and it's a root. It comes from your heart.
Mhm.
I don't think that racism just drops out of drops out of the sky and then you start to and you just like start to do like racist things. I think it comes from some type of insecurity, type of dysfunction in your own heart, right? And that is the root cause, and that is something that should be dealt with personally.
Okay. But are you saying there's a dysfunction in Black people's hearts, like towards white people? That's like it's just like a sickness or a corruption in their hearts? Because I think we
Some Black people.
Yeah,
right?
some Black people. And in fact, I would say furthermore, there's corruption in every single person's heart that's geared towards some type of sin or another.
Okay. That I can understand more generally, but my concern is that like we're talking as though like everyone's on the same level playing field. And I think when we first had this conversation, like in our duets back and forth, I kind of touched upon this, but like I would argue that a lot of the animosity that many Black people may have towards white people is because they've been mistreated. So I don't know if I would characterize that as like a dysfunction, like there's like something corrupt in their heart. Like being mistreated can make people resentful. That doesn't make their behavior okay. But I think we need to talk about that. Like it comes from a place, like it comes from being treated like a second-class citizen. That will make you angry and resentful. I think that's why a lot of Black people are angry and resentful towards white people. They've been treated like dirt, and so they're mad about it.
Some.
Yeah, well, I guess my response to that is that I don't think that all of this feeling comes from resentment. I don't think this is all resentment. I think some of it is insecurity.
Well, resentment is caused by insecurity, is it not?
No, sometimes it's like, it could be, I want this type of girl and I can't get it, right? And then that's not mistreatment just because you want a particular type of woman. And then it's like, oh, is it because I'm Black?
But she won't date me because
I'm Black.
He's a Mandingo and I'm Drake, light skin problems.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Like that's not just an insecurity. That's based on like an ideology that she has. That's like really harmful.
That's colorism, is it not? And colorism is a type of racism. So we can just have it something as tiny as that, right? That's and that resentment, that built up resentment turns into I hate all Mandingos.
Like I would say to you, like the insecurity comes from the fact that Black people are not secure here. Like it's not just like, oh, a feeling like, oh, I feel, it's like Black people aren't safe in a lot of places, in a lot of ways here. So that's why that's this kind of feeling like, oh, I'm unsure about this about myself, or I don't know about that. Like that comes from the fact that there isn't safety that there should be for Black people.
Yeah,
that's my argument.
The problem I have with a lot of these arguments is that the insecurity that Black people feel is unique to Black people. The resentment Black people feel is unique to Black people. And then basically all the internal workings of a Black person, no one outside of Black people can understand. I think that's just ridiculous.
That's not what I said.
But we talked about the resentment that Black people feel towards white people is unique to Black people, and no one can understand.
Because they've had a unique experience, not because they're wired different.
Granted, I'll grant you that. And then also the insecurity that Black people feel is unique to Black people as well, right?
Because of their experience, not because they're like,
okay, so tell me a negative feeling that Black people feel that is not unique to them.
Well, first of all, feelings are subjective, right?
Right. So I don't know how he says that they're unique. That's the thing. It's like,
but I'm not saying
a perspective. Oh wait, I'm helping you. Goodness gracious, I don't agree with none of y'all. So go ahead. What were you saying?
No, I was saying that like, if you wanna like draw comparisons, you could be like, oh, maybe Black people kind of feel the same way that women feel in a lot of situations, or that like immigrants or poor people, like they're like the idea of feeling like you're on the bottom, you're like under the foot of someone because you're oppressed, is not something that Black people have a monopoly on exclusively. I'm saying that like when it comes to this society, which is built in my argument on white supremacy and anti-Blackness, like that kind of hatred, it's about the experience. It's not just about like, oh, Black people are unique and we feel oppression and it's just us. It's that we have an experience in the society specific things that forms people's opinions and resentment. And until you remove those things, undo those things, people are going to be resentful, and in some ways, rightly so. Like, it makes sense that Black people are angry about being mistreated.
Yeah. So yes, you can. Okay. So it's perhaps too broad to say that there are other people in this category who feel similarly as far as resentment and insecurity, but it is perhaps too.
Why is it too broad?
No, because I'm saying like other people who aren't Black feel that, and you're like, no, it's just Black people.
But
No,
I'm not
what
saying
you're
that.
saying
I'm
is-
specifically
oh.
saying the opposite of that. I'm saying the resentment Black people feel is because they're oppressed. They're being oppressed for being Black, so people have that unique experience. But the feeling of oppression is not something that's exclusive to Black people. That's what I'm saying. So like people being resentful about being oppressed, feels like a pretty standard human reaction.
I guess. Okay. So I guess basically, how do you say that every instance of resentment or insecurity comes from those experiences, seeing that not all Black people experience life the same way?
But I'm not saying that. I said for a lot of Black people, and I've been saying that continuously, I'm sure there are anomalies. There are some Black people who just wake up out of bed and they just hate white people and they have no reason to do so. I'm sure there are a few people who like that who exist. But I'm saying in this context, most Black people are exposed to some aspect of racism that would foster negative resentment. That's what I'm saying.
Mhm.
So like,
So resentment, we're talking about how do those people work with that resentment, and how do they work through that resentment? And it's not insecurity, it's just experience, but it's not just the Black experience, correct?
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess basically, do you believe that an instance will happen? This is kind of what I'm getting at, where a Black person won't get a job because of the ethos of our society. They will think that it's because they're Black. They'll walk away and not like actually look at the situation and have resentment that builds up based on that false narrative.
That's possible. That is totally possible. But I'm saying that feeling, their sensitivity to is based on experience. That's my argument. Like, yeah. Oh, like in that situation, they could have been unqualified for the job and didn't get it because they weren't ready. But they feel that because they have been discriminated in the past.
Right. But
sensitive to that.
But their resentment is amplified in that situation based on zero experience.
No, it's extra sensitive. Yeah. No, I'm saying they're extra sensitive because they've had experience that shaped their perspective. Now, I'm not saying every situation you interact with a white person, they're actively being racist. Okay. But I'm saying sensitivity to racism makes sense because Black people all have experiences with racism.
But let's bring it back for 1 second. Prejudice, is that something that Black people can do? Or is it always going to be racism, or is it going to be prejudice? I just want to make sure that we kind of don't get away from that original question, is can Black people be prejudiced or can they be racist? Or both? So I just don't want to get too far from there.
Yeah, sure.
Just keep that in your mind.
I mean, I can answer that, but do you want to go first, or I can answer that up to you?
Well, I interrupted.
No. Yeah, go ahead.
Is it on me?
Mm-hmm.
He said, can Black people be racist?
No, I'm saying don't forget that we're getting kind of far with the resentments and insecurity, but I just don't want to get far.
Yeah. I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, so
we're talking about resentment and that person walking away from the job saying even though he could not be qualified because of his lived experience of being a colored and being at the bottom.
Okay. So this is how Black that instance could be there. Okay, so if this person goes on and every instance of failure, which are true failures, they believe is tied to this one thought that they never dealt with and never looked for the solution of. If it's compounded, we got 10 minutes. If it's compounded, if it's compounded by this idea and magnified, eventually they end up getting a point of authority and a high position in a job, and they decide to actually reject any white person that reminds them of that first instance, I would say that's an act of racism.
I don't know if I see. I feel like the thing that the way that I respond to that, and we were talking about resentment, we're also trying to keep in focus, like with prejudice. And so like I would say that like no, like Black people can be prejudiced, right? Like they're human beings. You can form a preconceived note. Like that's what I'm saying. You can form an opinion on something without experience, right? But I'm saying when you factor in the experience, then I wouldn't call it prejudice. I would call it like trauma. And can people respond inappropriately based on their trauma? Yes. So like if that person in that situation like had a negative experience with a white person, and they're like, now I'm going to never hire a white person, even if they're qualified, right? I would say that comes from their trauma, but I would not say that it's racism because, again, they're not moving Black people up the hierarchy in the system, right? They may be trying to push back against the system in ways that are self-destructive, harmful to other people, counterproductive, right? But I don't believe that it's part of the same process, that maintenance of the hierarchy. I think that's what makes it racism. It's the maintenance of this hierarchy. Pushing back against it, throwing a tantrum, breaking down because of the hierarchy, I wouldn't say that's racism. That's a terrible response, an inappropriate response to being racialized and to being mistreated.
Right. But if say a white person, their girlfriend cheated on with a Black guy, and then he's in a high position, he decides not to hire Black people or any Black person that reminds him of that initial person, would that be racism?
According to my logic, he's reinforcing the racial hierarchy. He's maintaining this like pyramid. He's keeping Black people out of these positions that they would want to be in, that they may be qualified for, because he has taken his opinion of this interaction with one Black person, generalized it, and applied it to.
So it's essentially incidental, though.
For what? For the white person or for the Black person?
Because if the situation was different, you wouldn't categorize it as racist. But because of this environment is there, even though the same actions are being done because of the surrounding environment, it's racism, but basically connected to incidental.
No, I'm saying the situations are different because of the group status of the member and their social status, like where they are.
But the actions are the same, though, is what I'm saying. The actions are the same.
The actions could be the same, yeah, but the motivations the motivations are built on a different ideology.
Wait, so if the motivation for both was I'm mad because my girl cheated on me with this other race, that's the same motivation.
I think that's an oversimplification.
Okay, so
well, I don't want us to get too far. We only have 6 minutes, just reminder, because free. So just a reminder, we only have 6 minutes. I don't want you to like,
Yeah, I think I understand.
Situations are different. Go ahead.
I think I understand this. So basically, one of the things I keep running into is when I talk about like trying to make a simple situation, you're saying it's more complicated. And yes, it's more complicated than that, but it's more complicated beyond race. And so like the individual is like I am oversimplifying the motivations, but the most important part of the motivation is not always race. And I feel like because it promotes somebody of the same color, there's an assumption that the most important part of their motivation is this way that it promotes this system. In fact, sometimes it may be, sometimes it may not be. And I don't like to look at people in that way because that could be simplistic as well.
Okay, I understand that. And I acknowledge that. I don't think that it's like that for every person, every situation, race is like the thing that's the forefront in their mind. But this again is where it comes back to the system, because the consequences of like enforcing race slightly or a lot in a different situation are different for people who are from different racial groups. Like the damage that racializing someone who's white has in the society is not the same as damage for racializing someone who's Black. So it's not that like, oh, when the guy in our example did that, he was like really thinking about the fact that like, oh, he's Black, he's like inferior to me, like, I'm not saying that was his mentality, but the impact that it has is different. Like the impact has because people have different stations in society. Like, so that changes how things affect them. Their experience is different, their perception is different, but it also changes like how they move through society, the opportunities they have access to, things like that.
Okay.
I guess when you say that, I feel like there's the pushback that I feel is that again, empathy and humility, it's important to imagine that you are like this other person. And you shouldn't have this block to where you can't imagine yourself like this other racist white person. I think that it's important and healthy for you to be like, you know what? In another life, I could be like that person, another circumstance, et cetera, and stuff like that. And the emphasis that in this life, I could never be like that person has some utility, but
yeah,
I think that humility and empathy are very important aspects to maintain.
Yeah, I agree about that. But if I think honestly, if we're talking about where in the situation or situations like this, the empathy is deficient, I don't think it's that Black people are not affording enough empathy to white people. I don't think that's what's going on. And my concern is like, yeah, of course, like we have this common sense of humanity that we should be like, oh, well, that's a human being, I'm a human being. We're the same in those ways. But I think that some of this, again, this trauma that people feel comes from the fact that like Black people haven't always been treated and still aren't always treated like they are human beings just like anyone else. And being kind of scared or edgy or defensive or even hostile to someone who belongs to a group of people who have routinely treated you like you're not a human being makes sense. That doesn't make all your behavior afterwards okay, but it makes sense.
I'm gonna
And
give
I
you
think
guys
we need to acknowledge it's different.
2-minute warning because I think y'all both are hitting on a really great point here. And I just don't want us to like drop off with like we're coming into, I can just feel it coming that you guys are almost there.
Yeah.
Like, the climax is just like right there. So I just don't want to like mess up the machine.
Do you want to leave and come back real quick?
Do you have time, Yahya?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm fine. All right, cool. We'll do that real quick.
Okay.
All right.